Hey guys, welcome back to another video on the Project Return online classroom. This is Ms. Madison, and today we're going to be making two different types of bracelets, and we're going to be using the same sort of technique, or I like to call it the 4 formation. For both of them, there is a third way that we can still embellish it even more, and I'm going to make a separate video about that, but today we're going to focus on the first two. You are going to need at least 2 to 3 strands of string, about 48 inches long each. If you do not have one that is 48 inches long, I know I'm kind of using whatever I have around my house. You can tie 2 of them together and then just kind of cut off any excess in the middle. That's what I did with my yellow one to make it longer, or you can just use shorter ones and you can turn it into a keychain. I'll show you how to do that as well. So there's many different ways that we can still utilize what we have to make this work. If you do tie it in the middle, we are going to get a little bit of a knot. I do not mind it there because I am going to be folding these strings in half, and so that top part is just going to be part of my loop and it's not going to ruin my design in any sort of way. So to start off, before we even think about any of the designs, we're first going to start by folding over and making our loop at the top. Now you can slow this video down if you need to, but I first start by tying it around just simply on my finger. And then removing my finger, you can see to the right, I create a little bit of a loop there. The top portion of my loop is going to go into that hole. And then I still pretty loosely am pulling that loop through the hole on the right until I have a little knot at the top. I do like to use my pinky as a measurement because we don't want to make that loop at the top too big. When we get to the end of our bracelet and we knot up all of our strings, if we make that loop too big, our bracelet's just going to fall off our wrist, and we don't obviously want that. So I use my pinky. Up until that point, I'm really working pretty loose with my knot, and I'm not tightening it and working my way up to my pinky until the very end. I then tape the top part of my loop to a flat surface. Working at a desk is a good thing to do. That way it's nothing that is getting pulled up or that's going to hinder you from being able to pull and tighten the strings as we work on it. I sometimes have to double up on tape, and then when we get to number 2, I even sometimes will tape it as I'm going down so that it doesn't twist and turn and do weird things. Now once I have it taped down, I'm going to start pulling apart and separating my colors. Blue is going to be the first color I'm starting with, then red, and then green. The easy part about this first bracelet is that we really don't have to separate out much colors. I only have to separate my first color out before I start to make my way from the left to the right. I'm going to bunch together my red and my green, and then you can start to see how I'm making what is the 4 formation. The blue is making the 4 portion of it as you are looping it through from the right to the left side, underneath the red and the green strings, pulling it through and tightening it up at the top. Just to help us keep track, I am going to write down what order we are going with our colors. Like I said, we're starting off with our blue and then going from our red into our green. What I suggest for tightening up at the top is at first, you can keep it pretty far away, pull your strings far away, especially so you know that 4 formation. If you ever start to get lost, take your time, bring yourself back to make sure that you can see where that 4 is. But when you tighten it up at the top, really get close to that knot and try and get it as tight as you can so that your bracelet is as most put together and doesn't start to fall apart as much. And for this bracelet number 1, for the first color that you're starting off with, you can really choose how many times you are tying it over those other 2 colors over and over again. I kind of varied between 4 and 5 times. It depends on how long your bracelet is and how much of that pattern that you want it to extend out for. Doing it 4 or 5 times will make it look shorter, whereas the example up top, that was probably more about like 6 or 7 times. But once I am done with the blue, I'm going to push it over to the other side, and then I'm going to start on my next color, which is my red. And then you just continue to repeat that process over and over again. This is one of my shorter strings, so I am going to be making it into a keychain, so I'm not really going to worry about knotting it at the end. But if you end up using this design as your full bracelet, it's totally okay. You can still use how we're going to wrap up number 2 as the way to wrap up this one as well. To wrap it up, I'm going to use an old keychain that I had lying around. I'm going to use the ring off the top of it, and I'm going to add it to mine, and now I have my own homemade keychain. And for bracelet number 2, a lot of the beginning portions are exactly the same. We're going to start it by folding it in half, making that small loop at the top, and then taping it down to our desk or our working area. The way that this one is different from the first one, we're still going to be using the 4 formation, but instead of taking, 2 strings of one color and then tying it around all the rest of all the other strings of color, we're actually going to be tying them individually, still working left to right. So instead of taking all of my teal and then wrapping it around all of my gray and my yellow, I'm going to take my first teal string. I'm still going to do that 4 formation, but I'm going to isolate it so that I have strings 1 through 6. String 1 is mainly going to stay in my right hand, whereas the strings 2 through 6 that are going to be in my left hand, they're really going to stay the most stable. My right hand is going to be the one that's going to be making the 4, and it's also going to be the one that's going to be tightening. I'm going to use that first string, I'm going to tie it twice around strings 2 through 6 individually until that number 1 string makes its way all the way to the end and becomes the new number 6. My second teal string now becomes number 1, and I start that process all over again. Now the first line that you tie is always going to look the weirdest, and then as you continue to go further down your bracelet, you can tape it off and make sure that it really stays nice and straight for you. I can sometimes take a few days to really work on these bracelets, so don't try and rush yourself and really take your time, especially if your hands are hurting. Now this is the third design I can make a separate video about, but I want to show you guys how we can wrap it up and knot it once we get towards the end. Now to measure it out, I want to make sure that the loop is going to line up to the end of the bracelet in a decent amount. You want to make sure it's tight enough so that it doesn't fall off, but loose enough that it's not going to be uncomfortable. The loop that is at the top of this bracelet is one of the first ones I made, and it's a little bit bigger than what I would prefer. It definitely is bigger than the pinky size measurement, so when I go to make this knot at the bottom, I'm going to make it a very similar way that I make the loop at the top, by wrapping around my finger and then pulling through the strings to the other side. But I'm probably going to do it about 2, maybe 3 times. This one, because the loop is bigger, I'm going to definitely knot it 3 times. If you keep it smaller, you might be able to get away with just doing 1. And that's really why we want to keep that loop small too. Once I have that first loop down, it makes it a little bit easier to then do a second one on top of it. I want to make sure when I go and make that second one that it is building on top of the knot, not necessarily right next to it. We're trying to make that knot and grow it a little bit bigger so that that loop has something to catch on to so that our bracelet does not fall off. And that is it on today's video on making either a keychain or a bracelet, or heck even an anklet bracelet using the 4 formation. We are going to be doing a third video on it so we can make a chevron look in another video. I hope you guys have a wonderful day, and I'll see you guys for the next one. Bye.